My sister-in-law didn't tell people I was her husband's sister, she told them I was the one who does something with plants. That was at her father's 60th birthday party, in a glass-walled house up in the hills above Pasadena, the kind of place where the floors are heated and nobody ever seems to cook. I'd driven 2 hours to be there because my brother asked me to, and within 10 minutes, she had me parked near the dessert table like a coat rack, smiling at strangers who didn't know what to do with me. I'm Margot. I'm 31. I'm a wildfire mitigation ecologist, which is a long way of saying I read landscapes the way other people read a balance sheet. Give me a hillside, a wind map, and a list of what's planted where, and I'll tell you which house burns first and why. I work for a research outfit that contracts with counties and insurance consortiums across the West. I don't have a title that impresses anyone at a dinner table. When people ask what I do, I watch their eyes go somewhere else before I finish the sentence. My family has never known what to do with that. In my family, worth is something you can hold up to the light, a corner office, a car lease nobody can afford, a wedding with 200 guests and a Swanee sculpture. My brother Desmond has all of it. He's a regional director for a commercial real estate developer, the sort of man who can talk for an hour about square footage and make it sound like poetry. He married Coralie 11 months ago, and Coralie is the daughter of a man named August Voss, who owns half the resort developments between Palm Springs and the Oregon coast. For a year now, my parents have orbited that name like it generates its own gravity. My mother says August, the way some people say Cartier. So when Desmond called and said the family wanted me at the 60th, I knew exactly what I was. I was the seat they had to fill so the table didn't look incomplete. The party itself was beautiful in the way money is beautiful, which is to say it was clean and cold, and you weren't sure you were allowed to touch anything. White orchids in low glass bowls. A bartender who'd clearly trained somewhere expensive. Out past the windows, the whole San Gabriel Valley spread out cold and hazy, and beyond that, the hills went brown and dry the way they do by late September, and I remember standing there with a glass of something I didn't want, looking at all that fuel waiting on the slopes, and thinking that not one person in this room could see it. My mother found me first. She came over with that smile she does, the one that's really an inspection. "You made it," she said, like I'd surprised her. Her eyes went down my dress and back up, hunting. "You couldn't have worn the blue." "This is the blue, Mom." She tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, not gently. "Just don't corner anyone with the fire stuff tonight, all right? It's a celebration." My father drifted over a minute later with a tumbler of bourbon and his party voice. "There she is." He squeezed my shoulder once the way you test a melon. "Big night. These are important people. Let your brother shine, okay? Don't make it a thing." "When have I ever made it a thing?" I asked. He didn't answer that. He never does. He just looked off toward the bar like I'd said something embarrassing and went to find more important shoulders. Coralie appeared next, gliding in a dress that probably cost more than my truck. She air-kissed near my cheek so as not to disturb anything. "Margot, so glad Desmond dragged you out of the woods." She laughed, light and practiced. "Listen, Daddy's got investor people here tonight, so just be easy, okay? Mingle, have a canapé." She paused, and I watched her decide something. "Maybe don't lead with the job. People get confused." "Confused by what?" "By you know." She waved a hand at all of me. "It's a lot. Just be a normal guest tonight." There, it was, light as a soap bubble. Be normal. Be less. Don't tell anyone what you actually are. I'd heard versions of that sentence my whole life, and the worst part was how reasonable they always made it sound, like they were doing me a kindness by asking me to disappear. I went and stood by the dessert table. I drank a sparkling water. I watched my brother work the room like a man running for office, and I watched my parents trail behind him collecting reflected warmth, and I told myself I'd give it 90 minutes and then I'd drive home to my dog and my real life. Then Desmond came for me. He had 3 drinks in him by then. You could hear it in the volume. Come here," he said, and his hand closed around my upper arm, not asking, staring. August wants to do the toast soon, but you have to meet him first. It's rude if you don't. Des, I'm fine over here. Don't be weird. He was already walking, towing me through the crowd, and people turned and smiled the way people smile at a small commotion. I had the sick, familiar feeling of being a prop in someone else's scene. He pulled me toward a knot of men near the windows, all of them in that soft, expensive clothing that doesn't wrinkle, and at the center stood a tall man with white hair and a stillness to him like a lake at dawn. August Voss. Up close, he had the kind of face that's used to being studied and has stopped finding it interesting. August, my brother said, in his big, warm, closing the deal voice, I want you to meet the rest of the clan. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. This is my sister, the family. He searched for the word and landed on it with a little laugh. The family project. We keep hoping she'll figure it out. A couple of the men chuckled politely. My mother had drifted close enough to add her line because she always has a line. Oh, we don't push Margot, she said warmly. She does her own little thing out in the hills. Bless her. My father gave the supportive husband chuckle, the one that says, isn't she a character? For a second it landed as a joke. The men smiled. Somebody started to look back toward the bar. August Voss did not smile. He looked at me, not the ones over people do, the quick math of do you matter. He looked at me the way you look at a face you've been trying to place all night, and then something moved behind his eyes, a door opening onto a room you forgot you had. His drink stopped halfway to his mouth. The polite host expression slid right off his face. Wait, he said, quietly, almost to himself. I know you. The little circle went still. Desmond's smile flickered. Oh, no, August, this is just my sister. She's not. Hartley. August said my last name like he was confirming something to himself. Margot Hartley. He set his glass down on the nearest surface without looking at it. You wrote the Tehachapi report. I felt the floor tilt a little under me. Yes, that was a while ago. A while ago. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, but there was nothing funny in it. A while ago, you saved me $11 million and 3 months of litigation, and I have been trying to find you for 4 years. You could have heard a fork drop. My mother's smile froze in the shape it was already in. My brother's mouth opened and produced nothing. I want to take you back because the rest of this won't make sense otherwise. 4 years before that party, I was nobody you'd want to be. I was 27, freshly out of a master's program with a degree that everyone in my family treated like an extended hobby, and I was doing seasonal contract work, the lowest rung of it. Hand mapping vegetation for a fire district up in the Tehachapi Mountains, east of Bakersfield, for a wage that barely covered the gas to get there. I'd sleep in my truck 2 nights a week to save on motels. My family thought I was still finding myself. My mother told her friends I was between things. That summer, a developer had a project going in those hills. A big one. Luxury cabins, a spa. The whole fantasy. I wasn't on that job. I was 3 ridgelines over, counting chamois and cataloging slope angles for the county. But I knew the area, and on my own time, the way I can't help doing, I started overlaying things. The developer's site plan, which was public record, the historical wind corridors, the fuel loads I'd been mapping, the single-lane access road that was the only way in or out. And I saw it. The way you see a crack in a windshield right before it spreads. They'd cleared the wrong vegetation and left the wrong vegetation. They'd sited the buildings in a saddle where the wind funnels and accelerates every fall. The evacuation road ran directly through the worst of the fuel, which meant, in a real fire, it wouldn't be an escape route, it would be a chimney. The whole development was a beautifully landscaped death trap. And nobody had run the numbers because the people who run the numbers cost money, and the people who'd signed off were getting paid either way. I wasn't anybody, I had no standing, but I built the model anyway on a 6-year-old laptop in the cab of my truck, and I wrote it up plainly. Here is the wind, here is the fuel, here is the road, Here is what happens in a Santa Ana event. Here is the projected loss of structures and, in the worst case, of people. Then I found a general contact email on the development company's website and I sent it to a stranger with no expectation at all. No cover letter, just the maps and the map and a single line. You have a life safety problem on this site and I think you should see it before someone gets hurt. I never heard back, not a word. I assumed it had gone into a spam folder or been forwarded around as a joke or simply deleted by someone who didn't like getting bad news from a name they didn't recognize. The season ended. I moved on to the next contract and the email turned into one of those small humiliations you stop taking out of the drawer. What I didn't know, what I learned standing in that glass house with 200 eyes on me, was that the email had reached the desk of August Voss himself, that he'd had his own people verify it, that they'd found I was right, halted construction, redesigned the access road and resited a third of the project, and that the following October a fire ran through exactly the corridor I'd mapped, exactly the way I'd said it would, and the rebuilt road held and the cabins didn't burn and nobody died. He tried to track down the author of the report to thank her and to hire her, and the contractor had folded, and the email trail had gone cold, and the name Margot Hartley had simply evaporated into the gig economy. I assumed, August said slowly, there in the middle of his own party, that whoever wrote that report had gone on to something enormous. I never imagined I'd find her being introduced as a what was it? He turned, unhurried, to my brother. A family project? Desmond made a sound. It wasn't a word. My mother rallied first, because she's quick. Well, we're so proud, of course. Margot's always been our clever one. 4 years too late and aimed entirely at the Millionaire. But she said it. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust my voice. There's a particular grief that comes from being seen, finally, by a stranger in front of the people who were supposed to see you all along and chose not to. It doesn't feel like triumph in the moment. It feels like something breaking loose inside your chest that you'd been holding clenched for years. August steered me away from the crowd with a hand that hovered near my back without touching it, into a quieter room lined with books nobody read, and shut the door on the music. The man's whole manner had changed. The host was gone. What was left was someone careful and serious. I'm not going to embarrass you out there, he said, but I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen either. He studied me. Are you still doing this work? It's all I do. Good. He sat down across from me and folded his hands. Then I have a problem I'd like to pay you to look at. And I'll be honest with you. I'd have wanted you on it even if tonight had gone differently. Tonight just saved me the trouble of looking. He told me about it. His company had grown fast, swallowed up smaller developers, inherited their projects and their paperwork, and lately, the numbers on the fire mitigation side had stopped making sense to him. Vendors he didn't recognize, billing enormous sums for brush clearance and defensible space engineering on properties up and down the state. Mitigation work that was signed off as complete but that his own insurers kept flagging. Premiums climbing on developments that were supposedly hardened. Money going out the door in a steady, well-documented stream, and somehow the actual hillsides looking no safer than before. My people tell me it's the cost of doing business in a high-risk environment, he said. My gut tells me somebody is selling me safety they aren't delivering. I want someone who can read the ground itself and tell me whether the work that was built was actually done. He looked at me, independently, answering to me and no one below me. I should have asked about the rate. I should have asked about liability, about the contract, about all the things a sensible person asks. Instead, I heard myself say, "How many sites?" He almost smiled. "That," he said, "is why I wanted you." I drove home that night and I didn't sleep, partly from the strangeness of it, the years collapsing in on themselves, but mostly because there was already a shape forming in my mind, the way there always is, and the shape was ugly. Because here is the thing about my brother that I hadn't let myself say out loud in that ballroom. Desmond's company, the commercial real estate developer he'd climbed so high in, had a subsidiary that did exactly one thing: land development and site preparation for resort and residential projects in high fire risk terrain. I told myself it meant nothing. Big industry, small world, of course there'd be overlap. I told myself I was tired and seeing ghosts, but I'm not built to unsee things. That's the whole problem with me. The thing my family has always found so exhausting. I started 2 days later. In a spare bedroom, I turned into an office with 3 monitors and a wall of topo maps and the steady far off rush of the freeway that I find, for reasons I can't explain, comforting. August's people gave me everything: invoices, work orders, contractor certifications, before and after site documentation going back 3 years. And I did what I do: I turned paper into ground. It came apart fast, faster than I expected, because whoever built it hadn't expected anyone to actually walk the land. On paper, it was immaculate. Clearance completed. Defensible space established to code. Inspections passed, signatures everywhere. But the documentation didn't match the satellite imagery. Hillsides billed as cleared in March was still choked with brush in the August flyovers. Fuel breaks that existed in invoices and nowhere on earth. Certifications signed by an inspector whose license, when I checked, had lapsed 2 years before the dates on his signature. And the vendors, a handful of LLCs with names like Generic Reassurance, Western Land Stewardship, Sentinel Site Services, names designed to slide past you. Thin histories, no physical yards I could find, no equipment. Companies that existed to receive money and issue paperwork and nothing else. They were charging premium rates for premium work, and the work was a ghost. I traced the approvals up the chain the way you trace a vein, whose signature authorized these vendors onto the master contractor list, whose division managed the site prep subsidiary, whose name sat on the agreements that brought Western Land Stewardship and Sentinel into the fold in the first place. My stomach was already falling before the name resolved, because some part of me had known since the party. Desmond. Not just adjacent to it, at the center of it. His division, his approvals, his signature over and over, neat and confident, ushering shell companies onto multi-million-dollar contracts to perform fire safety work that was never performed on the very hillsides where, in a bad wind year, that undone work was the difference between an evacuation and a body count. I sat back in my chair in that quiet room and I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with money. Because this wasn't paper. I'd stood on hillsides after a fire. I know what uncleared fuel does. My brother hadn't just stolen. He'd sold safety he never delivered in the one industry where the thing you don't deliver is people's lives. He called me 3 days into it. I let it ring out. Then a text, heard you're doing some consulting for August. Call me. I didn't. He showed up at my door the next evening in a quarter zip and good jeans, the casual armor of a man who's never once been afraid of a room. Hey, he said, smiling, like we did this. Can I come in? Nope. That landed. The smile held, but his eyes did some quick recalculating. Okay, fair. Look, I just think you should know what you're walking into. August's company is a snake pit. Mergers, politics, people gunning for each other. You're a science person. You don't know how the stuff works, and you could get used as a weapon in somebody's fight and not even realize it. What are you worried I'll find us? For just a second, something flickered. Then he reached for the oldest tool in his kit. He softened his voice, made it warm and a little wounded. Margot, come on, we're family. I almost laughed. It came up my throat like something I had to swallow back down. Family, I said. That's the word you want to use right now. What's that supposed to mean? It means family didn't stop you from calling me a project in front of 200 people. Family was fine when it was a punchline. I watched his jaw tighten. So don't reach for it now that it's useful. That was a joke, Margot. His voice dropped the warmth fast. Jesus, you've always been so. You take everything like a wound. You needed those people laughing at me, I said, so they wouldn't be looking too hard at you. I saw it hit. I know about the vendor's desk. I know the clearance was never done. I know the inspector's license was dead. I know whose name is on the approvals. The color went out of his face in a way I'd never seen on him. My confident brother, who can talk square footage like scripture, stood on my porch with nothing. Then he did the thing I should have expected. He pivoted to management. Okay, he said, low and reasonable, like we were two adults solving a problem. Okay, there are ways to present this. You frame it as cross escapes, vendor oversight failures. It's messy, it's not great, but it's survivable, and it doesn't have to have a name attached. You hand August a cleaner version and everybody. You want me to lie. I want you to be smart. A pause. Do you have any idea what this does to mom and dad, to Coley, to all of it if you blow it up? And there it was, the whole machinery of my family laid bare on a welcome mat. Protect the golden one. Manage the truth. Let Margot absorb the cost, the way Margot always has, because Margot is the one we can ask to disappear. You already blew it up, I said. When you signed those forms, you just assumed I'd carry it. Like always. Something crossed his face then that I almost felt sorry for. Fear, real fear, the kind he probably never let himself feel. And then, because he's my brother and I know him, I watched him reach past the fear and grab the meanest thing in range. You've always hated that I'm the one who made it, he said. This is just you finally getting to feel important. I looked at him for a long moment. The porch light was buzzing. Somewhere down the block, a dog I didn't own was barking at nothing. You think clearing those hills was about you and me? I said quietly. Des, those are real slopes, real houses, real families who paid for safety and got a forged signature. If a fire runs that ground the way I know it can, people die. That's what your signature bought. Not a corner office. A funeral, maybe several. I stepped back into my doorway. Get off my porch. He stood there a second longer, and then the fear hardened into something uglier. You'll regret this, he said. August likes you because you're useful. The day you're not, you'll see what these people are. Get off my porch, Desmond. He went. I shut the door and I leaned my back against it, and I shook for a while, not from doubt, from the sheer animal effort of not folding, which, when you've spent 31 years being trained to fold, costs more than anyone watching could ever know. My mother called within the hour, which is how I knew he'd gone straight to her. Her voice was syrup. Sweetheart, we hear you're doing some wonderful work for Mr. Voss. It's a contract, Mom. Well, this could be just the most marvelous thing for the whole family. With Desmond and Coley just getting started, and you finally in a room with people who... I'm not doing it for Desmond. A pause. The syrup cooled a few degrees. Margot, don't be selfish. That word. 31 years old, and that word still finds the exact soft place it always has. Selfish, I repeated. My father took the phone. Margot, let's be calm about this. Whatever's going on, it's a family matter. And family handles things quietly. Your brother may have cut some corners. People cut corners. You don't burn a man's whole life down over paperwork. I was looking at my monitors when he said it. At a satellite image of a brown hillside above a town of 4,000 people, a hillside that someone had been paid $200,000 to make safe and had not touched. It's not paperwork, Dad, I said. It's people's lives. Do you understand that? If that ground burns, it's not Desmond's reputation that's gone. It's somebody's grandmother who couldn't get down a road that was supposed to be clear. You always have to make it dramatic. And if I stay quiet, and a fire comes, I said, and people die because I knew and I said nothing, you want me to carry that so Desmond can keep his title. My father was silent for a moment. Then, cold, if you do this, don't come crying to us when there's no family left to call. I almost smiled, except it wasn't a smile. Dad, I said, when have you ever picked up? I hung up. I didn't cry. I went back to work because the work was the only honest thing in my life and it was waiting. The meeting happened 10 days later. In a conference room at the top of August's building in Irvine, glass on 3 sides, the whole basin laid out below us. August at the head of the table with the calm of a man who has already decided. Legal counsel, 2 board members, the head of the site prepared subsidiary, and Desmond halfway down the table in his best suit, jaw set, not looking at me. August nodded once. Miss Hartley, walk us through it. I plugged in my laptop, and the screen filled with the first hillside, the topography, the wind rose, the fuel load, the billing record laid over the satellite timeline. I didn't editorialize. I don't need to. The ground does it for you. I showed them the invoices for clearance that satellite imagery proved had never happened. I showed them the fuel breaks that existed only on paper. I showed them the dead inspector's license and the like signatures dated after it lapsed. I showed them the shell vendors, the thin histories, the money flowing out in clean, steady streams toward companies that own nothing and did nothing. I watched the board members' faces travel the same road mine had, from skepticism to discomfort to something close to dread. Then I put up the approvals. Desmond's name, again and again, neat and certain, authorizing every one of those ghosts onto the contractor list. This is out of context, he said, too loud, too fast. You don't understand how site prep procurement works. These are routine. These aren't procurement decisions, I said. I still didn't look at him. I looked at August. They're safety failures that were billed as safety work. The hillsides are exactly as flammable as they were 3 years ago. The company paid to make them safe, and the money went to firms that were never going to do it. The room was very quiet. August spoke, and his voice was soft, which is how I understood how angry he was. Desmond, did you authorize these vendors? Desmond's mouth opened, closed. Did you disclose any relationship with these entities? Nothing. You billed me, August said, for fire safety on developments where families live, and it was never performed. He let that sit. Do you understand what I'm holding, sitting in this room? Not a budget overrun, a trail that ends at a burned house with people in it. Desmond shoved back from the table. You're doing this because you hate me, he said to me, eyes bright and panicked. You wanted this your whole life. No, August said before I could. He wasn't loud. He never got loud. She's doing this because she can see what he was certain no one would ever look at. He turned to his counsel. Freeze the subsidiaries' vendor payments, open an internal review, full forensic, and get the state fire marshal and the insurers on the phone today, not tomorrow. Desmond looked like the chair had dropped out from under him. August, please. You should have thought about the families, August said, before you decided which hills were worth a signature. He stood. We're done here. There were no handcuffs. It's never like the movies. It's phone calls and frozen accounts and lawyers and a slow grinding machinery that, once it starts, doesn't stop because someone cries. Desmond left the building between 2 people from legal, and he didn't look at me, and I felt the strangest thing, which was not triumph. It was grief. He's my brother. Somewhere underneath everything, there's a kid who taught me to ride a bike on a cul-de-sac in Glendora. And I was the one who just ended his life as he knew it, and both of those things were true, and neither one cancelled the other. My parents called that night. My father's voice had gone old. My mother could barely speak through it. What have you done? My father whispered. I told the truth. He's your brother. My mother, breaking. He's your brother, Margot. And I'm your daughter, I said. I was your daughter the whole time you were calling me a project. That never stopped either of you. I waited. They had nothing because they never do. I didn't do this to him, I said, more gently than they deserved. He did this. I just refused to be the one who covered it, for the first time in my life. They stopped calling after that. When the investigation made it impossible to pretend it was paperwork, they stopped calling altogether. I won't tell you that didn't cost me. There are nights it still does. A month later, August offered me a job, a real one. Director of Risk and Resilience, an office in Irvine, a salary that would have made my mother's friends finally understand me, or pretend to. A title big enough to be a whole new self. I thanked him, and I said no. He didn't look surprised, but he asked anyway, why? Because the last time someone put me at a table, I said it was so I'd fit their picture. I don't want a chair at anybody's table. I want to be the person who reads the ground and tells you the truth, and I can't do that if I'm inside the building, worried about my own seat. I shrugged. I'm more useful to you on the outside, and I trust myself more out there. He looked at me for a long moment, and then he nodded, slow, like a man acknowledging something he respected. Fair, he said. We built an independent contract instead. Clear boundaries, my findings, my name, answerable to the ground and not the org chart. I still consult for him. It's the best work I've ever done. Desmond's situation took the better part of 2 years. Investigations, settlements, a plea on the worst of it, the kind of quiet ruin that money can soften but not erase. Coralie's family closed ranks around their own, and the marriage didn't survive the audit. My parents learned to live in a smaller story than the one they planned. I drove up through Glendora a few months ago, no reason, the way you sometimes need to visit the scene of who you used to be. I went past the cul-de-sac where he taught me the bike. I went up into the hills above town, where the brush was tall and gold and bone-dry, and I sat in my truck and looked at all that beautiful waiting fuel, and I thought about the word he'd used. The family project. We keep hoping she'll figure out. Funny. I'd had it figured out the whole time. They were just looking at the wrong thing, at the title I didn't have, the wedding I didn't throw, the table I didn't impress. They never once looked at the ground. That's the part nobody tells you. The ground doesn't care what you call yourself. It doesn't care about your corner office or your Swan East or whose daughter you married. It only cares what's actually there, what's actually been done, what's true when the wind comes up in October and starts to push. You can call me whatever makes your evening easier. The hill will still burn exactly where I said it would, and stand exactly where I made them clear. So if you spent your life being told you're the disappointment, the project, the one who never quite figured it out, let me tell you what I finally learned standing in that cold glass house. Don't argue with the label. Don't waste your breath. Just go be undeniably, quietly good at the true thing. Then wait. The wind always comes, and when it does, it tells everyone exactly who was reading the ground all along. For a long time, I believed the corner table was the truth about me. That's the thing I keep coming back to when I think about Desmond standing in that last house, calling me the family project like it was a kindness. He didn't invent that label. He just said out loud what my whole family had decided years before, and I had spent so long flinching from it that I almost let it become the shape of my life. What saved me wasn't anger. Anger is loud and it burns out fast, and if I'd walked into August's audit hungry to humiliate my brother, I'd have made mistakes, I'd have overreached, and a good lawyer would have torn my work apart. What carried me was something quieter and harder. It was the refusal to put my name on a lie, even when the lie would have been easier and the truth cost me my family. I think that's the part people misunderstand about doing the right thing. It almost never feels noble in the moment. It feels like loss. It feels like sitting alone in a room at midnight, knowing the phone isn't going to ring with the people who are supposed to love you. But the truth had teeth because I'd done the work to give it teeth. All those seasons sleeping in my truck, counting brush nobody thought mattered, learning to read a hillside until I could see a fire before it existed. That wasn't wasted time. Even when my mother called it between things, knowing your craft so completely that no one can argue with the ground you stand on. That's a kind of power they can't take back with a single sentence at a party. Desmond had charm. I had the actual numbers. Only one of those holds up when the wind comes. And the steadiness, that was the hardest part and the part I'm proudest of. standing on my own porch while my brother reached for the word family like a tool, while my father told me not to be dramatic, while my mother's voice went sweet and sharp at the same time, and not folding. I'd folded my entire life. I'd made myself small so the picture would look right. The night I finally didn't, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the door. Choosing what's right over what's easy doesn't get easier because you're brave. You just decide the shaking is worth it. If you're the one they seat in the corner, the one they call the disappointment, the one who never quite fit the frame, I won't tell you to argue your way out of it. I tried that for years and it never moved them. Go be undeniably good at something true instead. Build a thing no one can wave away. Stay honest when honesty costs you, and steady when staying steady is the loneliest thing in the world. Then wait. The wind always comes. And when it does, it tells everyone exactly who was reading the ground the whole time.